Hello and welcome to Diabetes Connections in the News. I'm Stacey Sims, and every other Friday I bring you a short episode with the top diabetes stories and headlines happening now. Before we jump into our top stories, as you can hear, I have a bit of a cold. If that's off-putting to you, every episode of In the News does have a full transcript in the show notes with all of the links to the stories that I'm bringing you. So feel free to jump over to diabetes-connections.com and click on this episode's homepage to read the news. Our top story this week has to be relief efforts around the hurricanes, Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. I wanted to have a very robust story here with lots of information about how you can donate or where people can go for help. But unfortunately, as I am taping, it still seems to be very local and very ad hoc. I will be sharing more on social media. I'm talking with Insulin for Life USA. They say they are engaged in sending supplies, and I will put their contact information in the show notes. But they asked me to hold off on more because they are right now organizing for Milton. Here in North Carolina, I am well east of where most of the damage was, and we are fine. We are doing lots of drives for insulin and diabetes supplies, but you know how this goes. You have to make sure you have somebody reputable to give this to make sure it's stored correctly and then distributed to those who want it. I would also love to hear from the larger organizations about what you are doing. Here in my backyard, it's been moms and people with type 1 getting in their vans and bringing stuff where it needs to go. I'm sorry to get on my soapbox here, but Breakthrough T1D and Beyond Type 1, this is your chance to show us that you have our back. Other organizations as well. If you're hearing about good work that people are doing, please send it my way, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. But this kind of stuff really cannot be managed long-term by individuals with coolers and minivans. All right, off the soapbox and onto the news. Medtronic has notified customers that battery issues with its MiniMed 600 and 700 series pumps can cause the devices to stop delivering insulin significantly sooner than expected. A low battery pump alert, which is supposed to mean you have 10 hours of battery left, can pop up even if there's a lot less time. Medtronic told customers they can contact the company to determine the need for a replacement pump. Medtronic has received more than 170 reports of hyperglycemia and 11 reports of diabetic ketoacidosis in the U.S. from January 23 to September 24, potentially related to the issue. Again, the pump models are all the 600 and 700 systems, including the 780G. More information over at diabetes-connections.com. A woman has undergone a stem cell therapy made from her own cells to treat type 1. This is in China, and they're saying that this woman did not need to use insulin 75 days after the procedure. She was injected with stem cell-derived islet cells, which then grafted inside her abdomen. The case is the first of its kind. Researchers say they took fat cells from a 25-year-old woman with type 1 and induced them to behave as stem cells. Then they used those to create islet cells, which, of course, typically exist in the pancreas, and create insulin. The patient in this study had previously had 2 liver transplants and a failed pancreas transplant due to diabetes complications. 75 days later, 96% time in range, and of course, a much lower A1C. There are many other stem cell-based therapies currently in development and in trials. The state of Texas is accusing major pharmacy benefit managers and drug companies of collusion to raise the cost of insulin. Texas alleged drug manufacturers Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi raised the price of insulin and then paid an undisclosed amount back to PBMs, Optum RS, Express Scripts, and CVS Caremark through a quid pro quo agreement. The PBMs then give preferred status to drugs with the highest list prices. If this sounds familiar, the FTC is suing under the same grounds, but the Federal Trade Commission is only suing the PBMs, not the drug manufacturers. The Attorney General of Texas says their filing goes so far as to describe a LinkedIn group these executives would use to talk about insulin pricing tactics. Canadian teens and young adults living with diabetes face twice the risk of hospitalizations and emergency room visits compared with younger kids with T1D. There's a new study in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology looking at gaps in regular diabetes care for complications in children under 10 and then adults up to age 23. You know what the challenge is here, right? Parents trying to take a step back from managing all aspects of their child's diabetes. But since the brains of adolescents and young adults are not fully developed, that can be challenging. The Canadian study says gaps in diabetes care actually start at a younger age than previously thought. They're looking at using things like text messages to the adolescents and young adults, and even an artificial intelligence chatbot programmed with what they say is answers from trusted sources. Earlier this month, the FDA announced that the nearly 2-year-long shortage of tirzepatide, that's the active ingredient in Mounjaro and Zepbound, has ended. They confirmed that the manufacturer, Eli Lilly, has a manufacturing capacity that can meet the present and projected national demand. That's great if you're trying to fill a prescription, but the people who run compounding pharmacies are now suing the FDA. When a drug is in shortage, the compounding pharmacies are allowed to sell unbranded, replicated versions of the drugs. The lawsuit says the FDA is abruptly depriving patients of much-needed treatment and artificially raising drug prices. A new project in Europe may help more people become commercial pilots and air traffic controllers while living with type 1 diabetes. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency project focuses mainly on pilots and air traffic controllers, but the data being collected will apply to cabin crew and passengers with diabetes as well. Right now, only 3 countries in Europe, the UK, Ireland, and Austria, allow people who use insulin to get a commercial pilot license. Right back to the news in just a minute, but first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Edgepark. Managing diabetes doesn't need to get in the way of your passions, your social life, or your budget. Edgepark can help you simplify your diabetes journey so you can focus on other important things. Edgepark offers a wide array of continuous glucose monitors, such as the Dexcom G7, Freestyle Libre 3, and more. Plus, Edgepark accepts most insurance plans and handles the paperwork. Go to diabetes-connections.com to learn more. And finally, Ryan Reed, who lives with type 1, is back on the track. The 2-time Xfinity Series winner was competing at Talladega for his first start of the season. I will read from the article. The day ended in a combination of a career-best Truck Series finish and a ball of fire for Ryan Reed. Luckily, the fire happened after he crossed the finish line. Looks like everybody was okay. I feel like I've known Ryan Reed forever. He moved to Charlotte just after his type 1 diagnosis when he was 17 or 18 years old to start racing for NASCAR. And we just talked to him earlier this year. He's now a tandem ambassador. And I just saw him at Friends for Life. I'm glad he's okay. Doesn't sound like the truck was okay. But, you know, even after living in Charlotte all these years, I don't know a lot about NASCAR, but that doesn't seem to be that unusual. And that is it for In the News. Please stay tuned for more information, hopefully, on how you can help these people in Western North Carolina, in Georgia, and in Florida impacted by the hurricanes. I'm hopeful, despite what I said at the beginning of the show, that we're going to have a lot more information. This is going to be an ongoing issue. I know many of you have reached out, and I've asked you to please hold on to your supplies and your checkbooks, but the need is going to be great, and it is coming. So thank you in advance. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.